Good day, and today we're going to learn a little bit about Jack London, the author, and a little bit about his most famous works. First, an introduction. Jack London was born on January 12, 1876. By age 30, London was internationally famous for his books Call of the Wild, Sea Wolf, and other literary and journalistic accomplishments. Though he wrote passionately about the great questions of life and death, and the struggle to survive with dignity and integrity, he also sought peace and quiet inspiration. His stories of high adventure were based on his own experiences at sea, in the Yukon Territory, and in the fields and factories of California. Because of this, his writings appealed to millions worldwide. Now, a colorful and controversial personality, London was often in the news. Generally fun-loving, London was quick to side with the underdog against injustice of any kind. An eloquent public speaker, he was much sought after as a lecturer on socialism and other economic and political topics. Most people considered London a living symbol of rugged individualism, a man whose fabulous success was not due to special favor of any kind, but to a combination of immense mental ability and vitality. Unfortunately, London is believed to have committed suicide on September 22, 1916, because of his alcoholism, multiple health problems, and financial trouble. And as you can see, he has just a great body of work, even though it is very short. We start off in 1902 with The Cruise of the Dazzler, and as you continue on through, you can see Call of the Wild comes the next year, The Sea Wolf comes out in 1904, White Fang comes out in 1906, all the way up shortly before his death in 1916. He has over a dozen works of novels and several short stories and several pamphlets to his name. Now, posthumously, The Call of the Wild received the Newbery Award in 1931. But let's take a look at one of his early novels called White Fang. Now, the beginning of this book starts off with two men, Henry and Bill, sledding, and they get stranded because their dogs are tricked by a she-wolf, Quiche, and they're eaten by the pack of wolves. Then the wolves come after Henry and Bill has their only weapon, a gun, and wastes all the ammunition by chasing the wolves, and then he gets killed. Henry uses his intelligence and ends up surviving after he's found by a group of men. Then the she-wolf mates with another wolf, One Eye, and has a litter of pups, but only one survives. Then Quiche takes White Fang to the Indian village where she was raised, and her master, Gray Beaver, catches her and White Fang together. He then sells Quiche and keeps White Fang. White Fang is attacked by all of the other dogs in the village and becomes very vicious. Then the Gray Beaver goes to the trading post and trades White Fang to Beauty Smith for whiskey, and Beauty Smith raises White Fang and trains him to fight other dogs. Then in one fight, White Fang meets his match against a bulldog and is saved by Weedon Scott. Scott trains him to be a good dog and takes him to California, where he saves Scott's dad from a criminal that is after him. Then he mates with Scott's other dog named Collie, and they have puppies. When we take a look at the characters you'll meet in White Fang, we'll start off with the main character. White Fang's mother was half wolf and half dog, and his dad was complete wolf. He's raised in the wild by his mother Quiche, but becomes more and more of a dog after he and his mother go to an Indian camp and start being raised by humans. He's very strong, but other dogs are mean to him, so he turns into a fighting dog. But he changes and becomes kind after he's loved by his new master, Scott. Lip Lip is another dog in the Indian village that turns all the other dogs against White Fang. We also have Henry and Bill. Henry is a musher with Bill, and he tries to escape the wolves, but is saved only by luck. And Bill is much quicker acting than Henry, and this causes him to be eaten by the wolves after he wastes all of the bullets in his gun. Quiche is White Fang's mother, and in the story, she is mainly called She-Wolf. She's half wolf and half dog, and escaped from an Indian camp during a famine. One Eye is White Fang's father. He is completely wolf and kills other wolves to mate with Quiche. Now, Gray Beaver is White Fang's first master. He shows no affection for the dog, but finally starts bonding with him, and then he gets drunk and sells White Fang. Gray Beaver's son Mitsa runs some dogs on a sled, including with White Fang, and Beauty Smith trains White Fang and makes him into a fighting dog. Lastly, Weedon Scott saves White Fang from a fight that he would have lost and trains him until they both become familiar with each other. We also see the musher Matt. He is Scott's musher, and he feeds White Fang and trains him on the sled. Scott's dad, Judge Scott, gets saved by White Fang. And lastly, Jim Hall is falsely accused by Judge Scott and escapes from prison and tries to get back at Judge Scott, only to be attacked by White Fang. Now, the book is set in the northern regions above California and in Northern California outright. Jack London was born and raised in San Francisco, California, which is near the book's setting, and so this makes sense. And lastly, let's look at an introduction of The Call of the Wild. The Call of the Wild is a story of transformation in which the old buck, the civilized moral buck, must adjust to the harsher realities of life in the frosty north, where survival is the only imperative. Now, Jack London's classic story from 1903 about Buck, the dog who is kidnapped from his home in California and taken to the Yukon where he's mistreated until a prospector discovers him, relates to his situation. Although the two are bonded, Buck yearns to run free with the wild dogs in the wilderness. So we take a look at some of the characters of the story. We start off with the main character, Buck. A powerful dog, Buck is a half St. Bernard and a half sheepdog. Now, Buck was stolen from California and sold as a sled dog in the Arctic. Buck is going to change here from a pampered Californian pet into a fierce animal, able to hold his own in the cruel world of the North. Spitz will be Buck's arch-rival and the original leader of Francois's dog team. Spitz is considered a devil dog who is used to fighting with other dogs and winning. He meets his match in Buck, who is as strong as Spitz and is more intelligent. Now, Spitz is an amoral being who fights for survival with all of his being, regardless of who he can hurt. Now, the men of the story, we start with Francois. He's a Frenchman who buys Buck and adds him to his sled team. Francois is an experienced man used to life in the North, and he impresses Buck with his fairness and his good sense. Perrault is a French-Canadian who, with Francois, turns Buck into a sled dog for the Canadian government. And both Perrault and Francois speak in heavily accented English, which London distinguishes from the rest of the novel's dialogue. Buck's final owner, John Thornton, is a gold hunter experienced in the ways of the Klondike. Thornton saves Buck from death at the hands of Hal, and Buck rewards Thornton with loyalty. Thornton's relationship to Buck is the ideal relationship for Buck, as each watches the other's back and is completely devoted to the other. And their setting would be starting off in California, but Buck is going to be kidnapped and taken up to the Klondike region of Canada, and eventually he's going to end up with John Thornton in Alaska. Thank you so much for stopping by for this introduction into Jack London and some of his more famous novels. If you'd like me to actually go through Call of the Wild or White Fang, let me know in the comments below which book you'd like me to go through. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Take care.